I am lost in memory. Death leaves a hole that grows covered with longing. The 30 days following the burial of the dead is called Shloshim. It is a time of transition for the mourner. After my father was buried, I put aside the garment the rabbi cut, symbolic of the rending of loss. When it was time to go through his clothing, there were many things to be divided. Most went to charity. I dreamt often about my father after his death. In my dreams, he was always youthful. It is this dream that accompanies me when I draw his face. It is 1961 and I am 11 years old. Adolf Eichmann is on trial in Israel. And in our rec room, 100 dead is a catastrophe. 1 million dead, a statistic. I had always known that my parents were survivors of the Holocaust, but until today, its relationship to me had remained invisible. Suddenly, I am injected with the white heat rush of a new reality. The Holocaust is a drug, and I've entered an opium den, being given my first taste for free, innocently, by everyone here. I have only just glimpsed its power, scanning the trail of needle marks on the left forearm of each person in the room. This is where my addiction takes hold. I will discover there is no end to the dealers I can find for just one more hit. One more hallucinatory entry into the world of ghosts. Will we never get any rest? My parents don't even know they are drug dealers. What is she talking about? How could they possibly imagine the kind of high age gives? The way it makes me want to dive into its endless depths. Sending me out of my home, alone, to the cinema, to the library, where I can see every movie and read every book that deals the Holocaust. But don't get me wrong, there were minutes, days, months when my addiction subsided and I had no need to see the man for another dose. But the craving is there. I'm forever tied to it. And I even learned to trade on it. Ow, don't do that. My parents were in Auschwitz. My parents were in Auschwitz. My parents were in Auschwitz. Is it funny enough? Is it sad enough? Am I too angry, too whiny, too petulant? Boo-hoo, poor little survivor's child. You see, I have this problem. Growing up in my parents' house was not tragic, but their past was. Here I am, some Jewish Sisyphus, pushing history and memory uphill, wanting to stand in front of my parents and say, "Here, take it, I don't want it, it's yours." But all I have to do is look up ahead and catch a glimpse of Primo Levi and Elie Wiesel, founding fathers of memory. It's not a matter of arriving at the deepest roots of knowing, but just of going down from one level to another, understanding a little more than before. Knowing that the Holocaust happened wasn't enough. I needed to know what it had done to my parents. My parents, Ben and Regina, came to Toronto in 1948. My father sprouted chicken feathers, soft, fluffy chicken feathers. He set up shop and became a kosher butcher. I was born in October 1949 on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, in an area of Toronto called Kensington Market. Kensington Market is my babysitter, while my mother and father work in their shop next door. Isn't she beautiful, my Aunt Jenny? She once won a prize in the Ted Mack Amateur Hour. After liberation, my Uncle Jack made his way to Katowice, the Polish town where my mother and father were staying. Jenny was sitting there on the steps of their building. Does Bernice Eisenstein live here? So my father's brother married my mother's sister. And they became not only extended family, but extensions of my parents' lives. My parents, my grandparents, and my aunt and uncle will live in close proximity to each other in their very own shtetl. Nem bubala, I just baked. She should only have nachas, joy. Yiddish was the soul and substance of life in our home. I don't remember hearing English as a language until I went to school. Auf Simches, auf Simches, auf Simches, auf Simches, auf Simches, 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 auf Simches, auf Simches, auf Simches. Confused? Auf Simches. A phrase said in celebration and also in offering condolence. Of Simches, may we meet on joyful occasions. A phrase to acknowledge loss and a wish for a community to meet together next in better times. Moishe, l'chaim, may you live to be 120, and Machala, may you live to 121, so you can have at least one good year. My mother's father had been taken from his home in Benjen to a labor camp. My grandmother found him after the war in Sweden. She and the rest of the family had been taken to Auschwitz. Their son, Lemmel, didn't survive. There is no center to be found in memory. There now, your father will kvell with pride when he sees you in this lovely dreskala. Is your daddy there? As hard as my parents worked together, my father still found time to play poker. Don't wait up for me, Rishu. Oh, Barak, not again. My father reminded me of a caged animal, a panther, sleek and mysterious. When he was angry, which seemed often, the veins in his neck would bulge. He was lithe and energetic. The sound of his footsteps left no echo. How do I look? You look great, Dad. After supper, my father would go to his bedroom to watch Westerns on TV. How he loved those Westerns. When war began, my father was conscripted into the Polish cavalry. After his horse was wounded, he went back to his family in Miechau, only to be taken to a labor camp with his brother. Eventually, they were separated, and my father was sent to Auschwitz. His mother, father, and 2 sisters did not survive. He had not been able to save them. How do I look? You look great, Dad. Dorka, Barak, Bolak, Srula, Chemia, Henek, Hella, Bella, Tonya, Anja, Yesha. Mom, you made too much food. Thank you, darling. My parents' friends, the group, were always together. They had all known each other in Europe. All were linked with the same past, shared the same history. I won't sit there. Ay, gewalt, but it's a simcha. Whenever the group got together, there was always the air of a reunion being held. They adhered one to the other with the type of bond difficult to duplicate, even with their own children. Look, it's Norman and Rose. They've come all the way from Detroit, Michigan. Norman had a wife and a young child before the war, but they died in a concentration camp. Rose saved my mother's life when they were both in Auschwitz. On the transport from Jechau to Treblinka, Carola was able to jump from the moving train, falling away from her entire family. I've come to understand something about what my parents and their friends have meant to each other, and realize why it would be impossible for me not to sense myself an outsider. Their past has shaped my loneliness and anger and sculpted the meaning of loss and of love. If for 5 years they were herded en masse into cattle cars, separated from families, bunkered in suffocating quarters, marched from one camp to the next, then all that was left as a final solution was each other. They were one another's home. Years later, my mother moved into a condominium. She was going through her jewelry. Would you like to have this? It was hard to believe that she could so casually offer it to me, my father's wedding ring. Do you know what this ring means to me? My mother arrived in Canada long before the country became her new home. When she was in Birkenau, she would be marched to a section of camp with warehouses called Canada for the abundance it held. A place where the confiscated possessions of Jews were sorted, separated into piles that constantly grew. One day, my mother was so cold, she asked a guard if she could wear one of the coats. Sewn into the lining of the coat, she found this ring. It was the ring she gave to my father when they married, not long after liberation. It was all that she had to give him, and he wore it forever. I was 5 months pregnant when my father was hospitalized with cancer. Tell them I'm dying. On his last night, he turned his head and looked at me. You are carrying my name. The next morning, we watched my father drown. I have inherited the unbearable lightness of being a child of Holocaust survivors, cursed and blessed, black and white and shadowed. On the day of my son's bris, my mother came to the house early in the morning to help me and my husband John set the table with food. When the ceremony began, my daughter and I stood off to the side with the other women in the room, which is customary. My son cried briefly, and my brother lifted him and placed him in the arms of his father, who held him as he was named.